Hello, once again, and welcome to the JCN Clinic podcast show. I'm Jessica, and today I'm joined by
Roshelle.
Rochelle is with us once again, which I'm stoked because she always brings a next level of energy. I mean, I know Chris has got energy. Let's not debate that, but Ro, you've got a significant high level of energy you bring to the podcast.
I try to have high energy.
And of course, passion. Let's not forget that. When Rochelle gets riled up, there is a significant dial up of passion too.
True. Very true. Can confirm.
We're going to do a Q&A episode today, which you guys tend to love. We've been putting up some social posts and asking you for any questions across the board. I've always been curious. Most of these are always health related, which you would expect. But every now and again, I'm like wondering if someone will ask something personal, but they haven't yet. Maybe it's because it's not one of those question boxes that you can like leave a question anonymously.
Maybe they will now, Jess, because you just said that.
I've said it.
So just, now get ready.
Also, I should throw out, I think this is a good space too for practitioners as well, or particularly new practitioners or those that listen to the podcast who study, particularly with Endeavour. It doesn't have to be Endeavour, but who are coming into nutrition and just starting with clients. Feel welcome to use this space to ask questions, because you've got practitioners who have been practicing for a really long time and you can pick our brains.
I wish I had that.
Right, me too.
When I was coming into nutrition, I wish I had that.
Yeah,
amazing.
I know. So we've picked 3. We'll see how we go, but we'll probably just do the 3. You guys have actually given us a lot. So if your question isn't answered today, it will, I promise, feature on another Q&A episode. But we've picked 3 today that we thought were really topical and also relatively interrelated in some way. Although isn't everything with health relatively interrelated? So the first one is from our lovely friend and longtime listener, Tanya and Polak. I think Polyak. Sorry, Tanya, we had this conversation last time about one of your questions and I remember that is the way you pronounce it. So Tanya has said, this is not so much a question rather than an observation. I've seen a lot of protein bombing, inverted commas, on social media lately, i.e. people putting as much protein as they can into one smoothie. Just wondering what your thoughts are on this. Is there such thing as too much protein at once? Love this. Love it. Shall I hand over to you, Ro, and we'll get your thoughts and then yeah.
It's so protein is such a hot topic right now, isn't it? We're all talking about the importance of protein. We're all talking about not getting enough protein, and especially for women. And clinically, that's exactly what I see. We're not really getting adequate amount of protein in our diet as a whole. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I will say to this question is we need to look at the diet as a whole, over the day, for example. So when I'm looking at the amount of protein in a client's diet, we're doing a full dietary recall of the day. And then I'm saying, okay, so how much protein, what does that look like for breakfast, for example? Then how much protein, what does that look like for lunch, for dinner? And then what are we doing from a snack perspective as well? So I suppose for myself, when I'm looking at this clinically, I'm actually probably, rather than looking at how much protein we can jam into each individual meal, I'm looking at how much protein can I get throughout the whole day and looking at more holistically in that approach. What I see mostly is breakfast is mostly lacking in protein. And so that's probably where I would focus my attention first in terms of, we're not getting enough protein for breakfast. Let's bulk up that protein in the breakfast time, because this is probably the biggest thing I see clinically is if we're not nailing breakfast protein, then the rest of the day is sort of suffering. And so it becomes that delicate interplay between, why do I even talk like this? Delicate interplay. What am I saying? But it becomes just more of a holistic approach in terms of like how much protein we can get into each individual meal throughout the day. So I probably look more at protein timing rather than how much protein I can get into each individual meal, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does.
Cool.
Totally does. It just, again,
Cool.
yeah, highlighting the importance of it, but that distribution throughout the day. And then, yeah, I totally agree. Like if there's one meal that it tends to lack, breakfast 100% is really common in Western style diets. I think with context too, is there such a thing as too much at once and overdoing it? Like I can understand how with so like anything, right, that gets focus in socials and it's really hot topic. Anything can be done in excess. Like you can push anything to excess, but if you're including protein in your diet, as Ro just said, with each meal and conscious of it in snacks, and it's the key is as part of a whole food diet without the expense of sacrificing your carbohydrates and your fats and your veggies and your fruits, then it's really, really hard to have what I would say would be too much. Like to have too much is almost like dropping everything else off and maybe going carnivore, or like, put like more of it. I mean, keto would be more fats, but yeah, to push it to excess, you'd have to really do that with the expense of other foods. And I think that I can understand how, like, for a lot of people, including Tanya, like you look at socials and it's just like protein, protein, protein. And if you're not sure on how to implement that into your diet, it could seem like maybe with some of the examples people see that it's just all about just protein in a meal. But yeah, as again, Ro was saying, if it's like part of your meals, then you're really not going to run into a space of too much. And I think, is there such a thing as too much all at once? Like it's not like you've got a bank and each, it's like, oh, you've tipped over 25 grams of protein in that meal. Like that last 5 grams, like that's just a waste. You're just going to weigh that out. Like your body will always use and utilize what it needs and store what it doesn't. Like that's not so much of a problem. It's more if you're having an excessive amount. So if you were like, I'm going to stereotype like a classic gym bro or gym gal, like, because it's both these days. Us ladies love our weights too. And yeah, all you are doing is just like protein, and say, you're having a meal that is just protein, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I would say that is definitely too much, but more so because of the expense of what you're not getting. So I saw, just for context, I was watching a YouTube the other day of a lady who is actually, no, I'm not going to say because then people go and look and I don't want to name names, but actually, interestingly, a runner, but also lifts. But her diet, her day on a plate, was very much just like meat and eggs for breakfast, protein shakes throughout the day, and then dinner was meat with a little bit of potatoes. So it's when she did up her count for the day, the protein was really high, and not so high that I'm like, oh my God, that's damaging. But what was obvious is that there was such a lack of carbohydrates, but also of like vegetables and fiber, etc. So I think really that when you're talking about how much is too much, it's like, well, too much that it's at the expense of everything else.
Yeah. And one topic I'm very passionate about, those day on a plates.
Oh.
I will never do a day on a plate in my life. Like, but yeah, you're so right. Exactly. And then as well as the form of protein you're utilizing as well. And I think this is a major question that I get asked in clinic, like pretty much for every client. Do we need a protein powder? Like, is that necessary? Is it necessary to be, supplementing with these, like, how many collagen powders are on the market now? How many protein powders are on the market? Like, is it necessary to be supplementing with those type of powders to just get more protein in? Like, is it even required? And most of the time, probably not if you're getting adequate protein from a whole foods perspective.
Sure.
I mean, if you're, and like I certainly utilize protein powders every once in a while, like especially if I feel as though like my breakfast isn't, protein dense, or it doesn't have enough protein, then I will, supplement, for overnight oats, for example. It makes it a lot easier to get my protein in if I'm putting a
For sure.
protein powder in there. But, it is a great question. Like most of the time we don't need to be supplementing with all of these different powders and potions when we're sort of like, being calculated and getting protein across the day in our meals as well. So, but I definitely highlight protein at
For sure.
breakfast.
No, that's so
it sets
true.
you up
Like,
for
yeah.
success throughout the whole day. Like it really does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so agree. Like there's definitely such a I mean, protein powders and collagens have been around for a long time, but they're part of this sort of popular picture at the moment with having them, and almost like should I, people feeling like, particularly again in clinic, asking those questions like, do I need it? Do I need it? And most people, as you say, as a part of an average daily diet, if they don't have increased demand or maybe certain things that they're not eating that make it harder, then yeah, absolutely not. I think the only other thing in this area, because it's such a big question, is I think people don't understand, and this is where there's so much confusion on socials of like what is not only what is protein, but how much protein to have, and then what that actually even means, like as far as serving sizes. And I guess I would just say to that, if you're unsure, I mean, we do have other podcasts on this topic, but this is where like it is valuable to reach out to a specialist and perhaps to someone at the clinic if you're really, really unsure about this topic and it's just something that you need to figure out for yourself. We've even got a package called the First Steps Nutrition Package that Roshelle runs, and it's all about this, like the absolute foundations and basics. It's actually one of my favorites as far as like this, like what do I need for me? What's that look like? You can get ideas of this online. There are resources that are out there for sure. And perhaps I can pop something in the show notes for everyone, like just like a good reputable site to give you a bit of a basic idea. But yeah, I would definitely say like you will never regret putting a little bit of time into figuring what's right for you instead of trying to figure it out off social media.
Yeah, it does get very overwhelming, doesn't it? Like the amount of information that's out there. And I always say to my clients as well, when they bring information that they've found on social media, or when they just bring things that they've researched or read online, I say the person who's sharing that information, like that may have worked for them, but I think the question we need to ask ourselves when we are reading these posts on social media, we are watching what people eat in a day, is like, is that actually going to be relevant for you? Like it's relevant for them, but we need to question whether that is relevant for you, and then make a informed decision from there, which can be so hard to do. I mean, we've been trained to be able to read the clinical research and actually understand how to apply that to individuals, but to do it for yourself can be incredibly challenging.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's move on to the next question. So Siobhan_K said, howdy. Howdy, Siobhan.
Hi.
Top tips to help reduce fatigue, minimize stress, and enhance general well-being in mid to late 40s.
Big topic. Woo, that's a big one.
So where to start?
Totally.
This one I find really fascinating because I definitely can relate to it with the amount of clients that we're seeing in the clinic. I definitely fall into this category myself, although I don't have fatigue, but definitely, making sure you're managing your energy and your overall well-being. Like, myself, I know Carissa's really focused on this at the moment. I'm sure Ro is, although you're probably not in. I'm trying to remember your age off the top of my head. Not that you have to say it on the podcast, but you're not, but I feel like you're not. Like, do you?
I'm not a day. I don't look a day over 25. I don't look a day over 24.
I don't think you.
I'm not there yet. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'm like, you're not there yet.
No, but I think this is a topic that, I mean, we certainly see in that age bracket, but it's not uncommon to see all throughout the life cycle.
Yeah, exactly. So realistically, when I think of something like this, I do go back to the topic we always mention, which is your foundation. So whether you're in your mid to late 40s or you're in your 30s or in your 20s, like you need to have a good sturdy foundation. So that means a good whole food diet, macronutrient balance and intake, just like, again, we're talking about enough protein, good quality carbs, fats, fiber. All of that needs to be as an absolute baseline with your diet, because if you're having problems with fatigue and having issues around managing stress, like you've got to at least make sure your foundations are sturdy first and foremost. But then we need to, once we know that's right, we need to consider the state of the gut. I'll always go to that. Like, are we dealing with generally a healthy gut, or have we had decades of poor gut function that may be decade after decade adding up and causing fatigue, making fatigue worse, enhancing the body's inability to deal with stress? So that, to me, I always consider the gut a foundation in its own right. So I have to lay those first and foremost. But other than that, which I know Ro will speak a lot about, is you can't also do this without that triad of looking at your just lifestyle and stress management, right? Like, as far as the fatigue and stress picture. And I know we can't make stress just go away, and people, particularly at this time in their life, can have a really busy time with full-time work and kids at a certain age and just a lot going on. So you can't take that away, but there has to be ideally a level of accountability when you're reaching this time frame where it's just been potentially a building up decade after decade, where you just have to start going, I need to prioritize myself and consider how much I'm in my own little rat race circle of going around and causing this amount of increased stress for me and potentiating my own fatigue. So I feel like that is part of the foundationals as well, but it's probably the hardest picture. But yeah,
I was just about to say,
what do you think,
that
Ro?
is the hardest part. That is the hardest part. It is the hardest part. And actually, like, that's I think like a whole topic of the podcast in itself, to be honest. Like, honestly, I certainly have been having some pretty hard hitting conversations with my clients of late about this specific topic. And yeah, I completely appreciate, you have got a family and you've been prioritizing family for like a lot of my clients years, of like getting kids through school and still having kids in school and, having that whole family dynamic. But, it comes back to that, and, I'm bringing out all the big guns today, but it comes back to like, you can't fill from an empty cup. What?
Yeah.
And I know that people say that and it's just like, oh yeah, here we go again. But it's like, you actually can't. So we need to find pockets of time in your schedule where you can actually do something for yourself. So I'm thinking of one client in particular who as part of her prescription, I said, I want you to go to acupuncture. Like, I want you to go to an acupuncturist, and I recommended one that I know and trust, and said, I want you to go, and that is your time. So that's your 45 minutes, your hour to focus on you. And, obviously acupuncture have other amazing benefits, and especially from an adrenal perspective, can be really helpful from a overall stress and like resiliency perspective. So that was really the main driver, was like to try to do that. But as part of that, it's actually having that time to herself. That never happened from the time she wakes up to the time she goes to bed, it's all about, looking after everyone else. And so this was my opportunity once a week for her to get out of her head and actually do something for herself. And the most beautiful thing happens, and it brought tears to my eyes when we caught up. The most beautiful thing happened because of that. She was finding that, pocket of time, that hour to herself. She started making changes to the time she gets up now. So she's getting up a little bit earlier before the kids. So she's got time for herself before the kids wake up. She's able, because she's managing her stress better. And obviously we're doing work on her gut function. We're doing work on supporting her overall diet. But now she's been able to, exercise and go and do exercise by herself twice a week. And so then it just creates this beautiful ripple effect where you do one small thing once a week or twice a week. It doesn't really matter. Even if it's 30 minutes, it doesn't matter. But then you start to claw back some more time to be able to then focus on yourself just that little bit more. And it adds so much more value to all the people around you as well. Oh my gosh.
I love that. That is such a fantastic example. As you said, that ripple effect, just starting with one key area that's about carving out a bit of time for yourself. That's not excessive or opulent in any way, but the knock-on effect of that is significant. And that comes, as this person's asking, that has a profound effect then on that person's overall energy levels, their overall stress levels. And then if they're in a better place, then their overall well-being and health is at a better place. But it just highlights how important it is to prioritize yourself. And it's not a selfish thing to do. And again, you're so right. It's this time where, particularly if we're speaking to women who classically are at an age with their kids where it's just been such a focus for everyone else to be at the top of the ladder and they're at the bottom. So it's just that refocus can be really, really hard. I feel like those are the foundations, and definitely that last one that we've just spoken to and explained with that client is probably the hardest and the most challenging. But if you have those in a really good place, give or take, because sometimes shit just happens and that's fine, but you're going to feel generally well. You shouldn't be dealing with full on fatigue. Your well-being should be in a good place. I think the only, other challenge obviously at this point can be what your hormones are doing, and then how that is affecting you. So I know if Chris is here, that would be something she'd be obviously going into, but it is definitely these perimenopause years, leading into menopause as it's getting potentially later into the 40s. For some women, it just depends. So that change in your hormones can have an impact on your energy, on your well-being, on your mental health, even on your digestion. There can be all sorts of changes that occur. So that is something else that's really important to identify and consider. Not everyone is going to have issues with that. Absolutely not. But if you feel like you have all of those foundations pretty much in check and you're something's not right, probably the next area is going to be you need to get your hormones looked at. Overall blood work, that's another thing for someone at this point, for all of us. But if you're all about enhancing general well-being, getting regular bloods once a year, making sure you're keeping on top of any nutrient deficiencies or keeping an eye across any patterns that you're seeing in the bloods, and having a health professional that can look at that with you, and just staying active, which is part of that kind of foundation as well, right? So many women, I know we're talking more women, sorry guys, but it can be a pattern, I think, even right up until maybe your late 30s and 40s, where women will say, oh, I just could always eat this or do that, and, I was fine. But this can be a time where, with hormones and things potentially slowing down, that the body's metabolism changes. So keeping your body moving, as far as not putting on lots of excess fat around the organs and the midsection, but also bone health as well. So we've talked at length in other podcasts about the importance of like strength training. Again, it doesn't have to be excessive, but I think as far as general well-being at this time in your life, like if you're not moving your body regularly and including at least once a week some form of strength training, then that, like, I'm such an advocate for that.
Me too. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think as well, like the movement you do matters too, in terms of, yes, making sure that you're doing resistance training. So, adding load and, making sure that you're maintaining your lean muscle mass, because we know that that reduces as we age. But the other thing that I definitely talk to my clients about during this sort of age bracket is not putting more stress on your body by doing like a lot of high intensity training. Like, do things that feel good for your body. And so I always say to my clients, like, check in with your body after movement. Like, if you feel depleted after you do that movement, it's probably not the right movement. And like within reason, right? If you're getting depleted after everything you do, then that's different. Sorry, we need to choose one. But I'd like, if you're feeling more depleted after that exercise bout, then maybe we need to look at a different movement pattern for you. And so that's where, resistance training is so important. For all of the reasons that you've just mentioned, Jess, but also things like yoga, Pilates, where we're focusing in on our breath. And for clients that don't have pockets of time to themselves, like you're actually spending that 30 minutes, 45 minutes, like focusing in on their breath, their body, how it feels, and actually moving their nervous system into more of that relaxed state by doing that movement pattern, rather than like that high intensity movement where they're just running around and jumping around. So I think, actually checking in with the type of movement you're doing is really important too. And just walking is so valuable. Like, everyone discounts walking as like this just thing that doesn't really make too much of an impact, but it does. Like getting outside in the sunshine. It's not sunny here today, but getting outside in the sunshine and actually, like moving your body in that way as well can be so valuable. And I think it gets discounted as something that isn't really that important, but it absolutely is, from a mental health perspective, from a fatigue perspective. Like I'm always telling my clients, get away from your desk at lunch, get outside, like when you eat outside or you go for a little bit of a walk, like just to increase those energy levels for your afternoon bout so that you're not getting that dip in energy. And then, checking in with your body after you're doing those types of movement patterns, just to see how you're feeling, because your body will tell you, like, whether that was valuable or maybe
so true,
taking energy away.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's a really comprehensive list that we could delve into every area in deeper context, but I think that's a really good list for that question. I would mention also, just again for extra resources, we've got the perimenopause package that Carissa runs, which is just tip top for this question. Like if you're wanting help again, just to hone in and work with someone, couldn't pick a better package that is really focused to this area. So keep that in mind. Okay, question number 3 by...
We're doing good.
We are, right? We're smashing these.
We're good.
I was just thinking, before I get into this one, when you're talking about... when when you've pushed it too much, and like obviously that's a good sign. I personally, with my training, have been like very carefully increasing my intensity over the past year, but on the weekend I had a run. I got back and I was so wiped out that afternoon. Like, it's such an example of what you're talking about, where you just kind of go too much. You think you're at a certain level, although sometimes that just happens with what I'm doing, where you get out and you're like you're on a new track and the terrain isn't quite what you thought, so the intensity is higher, and you don't have it. You think you've got enough nutrition with you, and then like you're like, I'm running low on this, and but I got back and I was like, didn't expect it, but it was like I was on the couch I wasn't like fatigued, but I was like, whoa, like I am spent.
Totally. And it is. It's, our own personal experiences too. Like, we do the same
right.
thing. We do the same thing. Like,
like, whoopsie. But not all the time. All right. So third and final question is Kimber Scoop. This person looks highly familiar to me, I might say. When you have a plan with JCN, aka Jessica Cox, what frequency is inverted commas once in a blue moon or treat yourself when typically we are DFGF? 1 meal a week, once a month, a scoop of gelato or a burger? We loved this question.
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite question. Thank you. Thank you for giving us this question. I love it.
I'll let you go first this time, Ro.
Oh, okay. Well, look, and I hate to answer this generically and basic, but it is going to be very client dependent. Like, this will be client dependent. So if we are in the thick of gut work, like if we are in the thick of a gut protocol, I am going to tell you to be quite strict in terms of like removing the gluten, removing the dairy, because we've got, and I'll just use an example of like a 12-week protocol, where we're trying to dampen down inflammation, where we're trying to reduce your symptoms, where we're really trying to work hard at supporting your overall gut barrier integrity and your overall functioning of your gut. So if you're there, I will be saying, unfortunately, we're going to be like really honing in on being quite strict gluten dairy free. But it is very client centric in terms of like what that looks like from week to week to week as well. I'm actually thinking of a client who has Crohn's disease, and I remember saying to him, like, give me 12 weeks. After the stool analysis testing, I said, give me 12 weeks. 12 weeks of strict gluten and dairy free. After 2 months, so it was 8 weeks, he was like, look, I'm not really feeling much of a difference. So we got to a certain point with the supplementation and with the dietary changes. After 2 months, he goes, yeah, everything's kind of just stable. I'm just feeling exactly the same way. And I said to him, give me another month. Like, I need another 4 weeks. Can you do another 4 weeks? Give me another 4 weeks. I start like begging, at this point, just give me 4 weeks. I got 4 weeks. And he said yes. And the difference between how he felt week 8 to week 12 was astronomical.
Wow.
He was a different person. And so I know it seems a little cruel and mean when we say, look, we want you to be strict for 12 weeks, but clinically we really do see a significant change in that period of time. And so for this client in particular, he completely different person between that 8 to 12 week mark. Like, he was saying, like, the brain fog completely lifted. His cognition was so much better. He wasn't walking around in that haze that he was walking around, in previously, and he just felt like a different person. And so I was just like, wow, that really cements to me the need to be, like, depending on the protocol, but the need to like have that quite strict and stringent protocol for that period of time. But in saying that, it depends on what's going on for you and what's going on for the client. And I think as well, like, we need to meet the client where they're at as well, Jess. And you would
Exactly.
know this too. Like, I completely understand that going gluten-free and dairy-free can be incredibly challenging. And so I think, it's about finding ways to make it work with your lifestyle and to make it work with your family, or, the way that you structure your food, and giving you the tools to be able to do that. Like, I think that's the biggest thing, like, not making it such a hard transition to move into those particular, ways of eating more longer term as well. I don't know if I've answered that. I think I went on a rant.
No, I
Sorry
definitely.
about that. A rant.
No, that's super valuable, particularly with respect to that start of this process and the use of diet, and like where strictness is often needed. I think what I would add to it is that as we work with someone and transition and they get into a more maintenance care And
Totally.
often as part of that process, we'll move clients through a really specific reintroduction of different types of food, depending on what they've had to eliminate or reduce. So we'll essentially individually, as Rochelle was saying, like it's so independent. It's like we test each client with how they go. So that's why, again, this question is like, at the end of the day, the answer is it depends on you as an individual, because some people, I've seen every spectrum. Some people with context to say dairy, they're feeling absolutely amazing. Maybe they're 6 months into treatment. You have added so much back into their diet. They are great. But when you go, okay, it's dairy time, we start to trial dairy in a systematic way. Instantly, as soon as they have it, they feel unwell, whether it upsets their gut, they break out, like whatever their symptoms are. It is so obvious that their body instantly is like, no. Others are different. They find with testing and guidance that if they have some dairy once every second week, once a month, even once a week, they go out on the weekend and they have something with a bit of dairy in it, they're fine. That's fine. It's where their benchmark is at. And gluten's the same, because everyone, again, will be different. I think with gluten and dairy, if it is a problem, the thing is they're usually a true intolerance. So we can do all the gut work in the world, and if we can reduce the reactivity of the gut, there is a chance we can reduce the reactivity to dairy and gluten. But depending on how strong that intolerance is, there's still a bucket that you can fill up. So we're always like, well, where's that bucket level for you? What does that look like? And unfortunately, that looks different for everyone. And that's where we work with our clients to figure that out. And you have to be honest with yourself as to what that is. That's probably my biggest kind of like, home hitter. And particularly even with my client here, like you really will learn to know what is right for you and what that looks like where to push it. And sometimes with certain clients that can be a little harder because it may not be a gut symptom, it might be a skin symptom, and it can take time to build up. So that's where working with that and figuring out those parameters as you move forward is really important. It can be a little frustrating if it isn't an immediate reaction, but I'll often with, say, dairy, say to a client, like, instead of having this only a few times, we're going to concentrate over the next month in having more of this. If you're not getting obvious symptoms straight away, let's actually really build it up, include it regularly over the next month. After a month of doing that, you should have a pretty good idea of whether this is for you or not. So there's ways we can work with a client to do it, but we all know where it is, the line. I know where my line is at. Rochelle knows where her line is at. I know I
cross
have
mine sometimes. And I just say to my clients, you choose your hard, right? You choose your hard. So like, if you know that you're going out and you're going to eat something that you know, like they already know. Don't tell me you don't know. You know. Then, like, you need to deal with the consequences of that action. So you choose your hard.
That's it. And maybe if you're at a point where you are well, I always say to a client, it's like deciding to have too many drinks. If you want to go out and have a big night with your mates and you have too many cocktails, you're going to feel like crap the next day and have a hangover. Same if you want to go out and have a burger or whatever it is, you just need to understand that that's probably going to make you feel crap the next day if that is your line crossed. And again, you'll know what it is like for you and what you can get away with. And if you don't, that's part of what we work you through individually to figure that out. And I wish I could say that for everyone it's once a week, or for everyone it's once a month, but I can't because it's different. And I bet you Rochelle and I are even different. Absolutely.
Yes,
what I could do and get away with versus what she can, even with probably between even gluten and dairy, like which one knocks us around more. So, and if Carissa was here or anyone from the JCN Clinic, all of us would be different. And that's just the way it is because my immune system's different to Rose, my gut's different to Ro, and vice versa.
Yeah. And you're so right, Jess. And I think like the further we move through the treatment plan, like the more the more flexibility we have to be able to start adding some of these components in. But then I always think as well, like sometimes it feels on a gut protocol or gut journey, it feels like we're taking like 2 steps forward, and then maybe we'll take 3 steps back, and then we sort of go back to 2 steps forward. And sometimes the protocols can look like that too, where we're going great guns, and then we start to add something in, and then maybe we feel a little off, and then we go great guns again. And that is just the way that the protocol ebbs and flows. But we have to, like ultimately our goal, and I'm sure like you would agree with this, Jess, is we don't want you on a restricted roller coaster.
No,
like we want to be bringing as much food in as we can and as much diversity, and we want you to be able to enjoy food. Like we want it to be a joyous occasion for you. And so that is our goal. Our goal is to get you there. But sometimes that journey looks different depending on what you initially presented in the clinic with and what work we needed to do as part of that protocol. So yeah, I understand, like it would be really wonderful if we could answer that question and say this particular time frame, but yeah, everyone is quite different. And I think, and I know we were talking about this before, Jess, too, I think the more I move through practicing, I remember when I was a nutritionist fresh out, and I was like, you will do this, and this is what we're doing. No treats, no anything. And I was like a real taskmaster, but I think I worked out pretty quickly, maybe 3 months of trying to be that way. I was never going to work, And so I think the further I get through practicing and the more clients I see, the more I really understand that it is about, reducing that restriction as best we can, but also giving you flexibility back as best we can as well, because life is meant to be lived, food is meant to be enjoyed, and so like our goal ultimately is to get you off that restrictive roller coaster and to be able to get you doing those foods and eating the foods that you love, if possible, throughout your work with us as well. So but everyone's journey looks completely different.
Well said. Well, I think that sums up our 3 questions for today. Again, we've got a lot here, so we will cover them, but I think they have worked quite well together. Before we wrap up, I know we didn't even talk about this, Ro. Usually we do our recommendations at the end of the show, and I haven't even thought about it either. But I just thought completely non-related to recommendations, just something a little bit more personal / update is where are you heading off to in about how many weeks' time? Speaking of comments around like food variations and where the line's at and the buckets.
Look, I'll be brutally honest. That line is going to be crossed, and it's going to be crossed pretty exponentially over the next little while. So I am heading to Italy in a month's time. I have never been to Europe. Never been. So yeah, I'm really, really thoroughly excited to just experience the food and the culture over there. So I think a lot of what I've just actually said was very much positioned on me going to Italy and me wanting to be able to have flexibility. It's like, let's push this envelope as much as we can. But yes, it's going to be really exciting to actually see the different foods over there, and to experience them and like see the differences between Australia and what I can tolerate in Australia and what I can tolerate over there. So I'm excited to choose my heart and push the envelope.
Choose my heart. I love it. It's such your saying.
But in saying that though, it's I haven't been drinking alcohol, so it's been over 5 months now since I've had alcohol. So, so I'm not going to limit myself when I go overseas though. So I'll probably have a couple of Pinots, not gonna lie. I'd
love to chat about your holiday when you get back on the podcast with relation to this, and even share a little bit of my own around the food and travel topic. I know a lot of our clients at the moment are in Europe, and it's just such a classic story here over and over again about the tolerance of foods over there versus our food, and even from an alcohol point of view. But you can't also discount the fact that you're on holidays and we're how low
Yeah,
stress
for
levels
sure.
are and the good quality sleep. And yeah, it'd be a really interesting chat. And yeah, maybe once you're
Oh,
back, we can organise a time and you can
I would
bend our
love to
ear.
talk about that. I would love to talk about that. Absolutely. Let's definitely plan that for sure. For sure.
Can salivate over certain meals. Oh, love it. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. If you would like to have your question answered, as some of our listeners have today, just head to the JCN Instagram page. You'll see we post it regularly in our stories, and then regularly in our feed. There's a Q&A post, so you can just pop your question there. And as I said earlier, like health obviously is huge, but if you're a practitioner or budding practitioner, you've got questions there, like, yeah, you can hit us up with anything. Just lastly, it would mean the world to us if you're a regular listener. Like, thank you, like, for your support. It means a lot. Would love it if you could take the time, just a few seconds or so, to click through on iTunes and leave us a review, because that really helps people find the podcast. But otherwise, I think that's pretty much it. I want to thank Ro for coming on, but we're going to have her on lots more because she's just awesome.
Thanks for having me. How exciting.
But otherwise, yeah, everyone have an amazing day or evening whenever you're listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.